Hey there, interwebs, and welcome to part 3 of an unintended trilogy of fruit, here on How Fascinating. We've previously discussed bad apples and how avocados are too good for this wicked world. Now it's time to examine the pineapple. To begin with, the thing which makes pineapples so fascinating is that Europeans have known about them for a little over 500 years now, 527 to be exact, and in that time the mythology has almost completely eclipsed the truth of them. If you Google any fact about pineapples, the first thing you'll find will be the common story, but then if you do a little more research, you'll discover that's false. Take, for example, the name. The usual folk etymology, that means fake etymology, is that they're called pineapples because they have a rough outer texture like a pine cone and a stiff inner flesh like an apple, but that's only half right. Pine cones are certainly involved. The name comes from the Middle English word pineapple, which referred not to the fruit we know today, but to pine cones. Remember from my previous fruit video that the word Epp-Leppel was more or less a catch-all word that referred to any fruit, and pine cones are the fruit of the pine tree, hence the name. When Columbus's expedition first encountered the exotic new fruit in November of 1493, they thought it bore a striking resemblance to a pineapple, meaning pine cone, so they called it a pineapple, which wouldn't be confusing at all. Later on, in the 1690s, we began calling these pineapples pine cones, but continued to call these pineapples pineapples. So you can see how there's a nice, easy story, but then you do some digging and discover a new explanation which proves the previous one to be false. Sometimes this can even happen multiple times. Case in point, symbolism. Is the pineapple a symbol of hospitality, nobility, adventure, or revenge? Maybe all of the above. Let's take a closer look, shall we? According to popular legend, the pineapple symbolizes hospitality because when a sea captain returned to his colonial home from a tropical voyage, he'd spike one on his fence post, thus letting all of his friends and neighbors know that he was home safe with lots of new tales of adventure, and they should all come visit to hear them. That's the story, and I don't believe it for a second. The biggest factor which makes this story as hard to swallow as, well, a pineapple, is one of simple economics. Pineapples were exceptionally valuable. A method by which to grow them in cooler climes using hothouses wasn't developed until the latter half of the 17th century. Prior to that point, all pineapples had to be grown in the tropics and then shipped to their intended destination, and in order to make it from the Caribbean to North American colonies, or worse yet, Europe, the fruit had to survive a journey by sea which was hot, humid, and slow. Most of the cargo rotted before ever reaching its destination, and so the ability of a host to adorn the dining room table with a whole, unspoiled pineapple was a tremendous show of wealth and power, but it had nothing to do with hospitality. That wouldn't come until much later. During the colonial era, pineapples were in such short supply and thus high demand that confectioners would rent them out to people by the day for use as ornamentation at dinner parties, then sell them again later to wealthier customers who could afford to actually eat them. Keeping this astonishing value in mind, what sane individual would mount such a treasure on his front gate where it would rot away to nothing, assuming that nobody stole it first? Perhaps someone for whom it was more accessible, and therefore less valuable. I have also seen it claimed that the pineapple's connection to hospitality goes all the way back to the native Carib people, who would place it outside of homes and or villages which were welcoming to strangers. One claimant cites the World Encyclopedia of Food for this factoid, but I found no primary source to indicate this was ever true. As a matter of fact, the first documented correlation between pineapples and hospitality doesn't appear in the historical record until 1935, where it shows up in a publication by the Dole Fruit Company encouraging people to eat more of their canned fruit and visit lovely Hawaii. And just by the way, pineapples aren't even a native Hawaiian fruit. They were only introduced to the islands in the 18th century by Spanish explorers and weren't commercially farmed there until 1886. So if the symbolism of hospitality didn't originate with the natives, and the tale of the returning sea captain skewering a pineapple on a fence post is a load of nonsense, then why do so many buildings from that era feature pineapple-styled finials and other architectural elements? Well, as you might expect, the answer is a bit complicated. Firstly, the pineapple was still a symbol, just one of wealth and might rather than welcome and hospitality. In truth, the pineapple quickly became a symbol of nobility upon its introduction to Europe. Because it was so expensive, its availability was limited to the rich, but it also had a golden PR opportunity. Being a New World agricultural product, Europeans didn't yet have any allegorical meanings attached to it. Pomegranates were linked with Persephone and the underworld, and apples were tainted by original sin in the Garden of Eden, but no legends made any mention of pineapples. Francesca Bowman, who literally wrote the book on the fruit and is the leading expert on its history, states that it was previously unknown in the Old World meant that it was free of the cultural resonances that engulfed other fruits. Essentially, its meaning was yet to be assigned, and the nobility pounced on the opportunity. The French priest Father Dutertre declared it to be the king of fruits, and the pharmacist to Louis XIV, Pierre Palmet, agreed with the title, saying, "It is much the finest and best of all that are upon the face of the earth. It is for this reason that the King of Kings has placed a crown upon the head of it, which is an essential mark of its royalty." King Charles II of England named it King Pine, and even posed for a portrait circa 1675 where he was receiving one as a royal gift. The definite cases of pineapple design motifs, such as the ceramic dishes of colonial Williamsburg or the Dunmore pineapple folly in Scotland, are merely celebrations of the exotic and yet noble and highly treasured fruit. I say definite cases because part 2 of the explanation involves a case of mistaken identity. Near the beginning of this video, I told you that pineapples got their name by resembling pine cones. That visual similarity is also what causes many people these days to look at finials such as this and mistake it for a pineapple when it is, in actuality, a pine cone. Think about it for a moment. How many pineapples have you seen that look like this, and if it is meant to be one, then where's its iconic crown of leaves? No, the object adorning the top of this post is a pine cone, but that begs the question, why a pine cone? The short answer is because booze, and the long answer involves the Greco-Roman gods. This is the thrisis of Dionysus, god of vines and various vices. The Romans called him Bacchus, and he was their god of wine, fertility, and truly crazy parties. His staff is topped by a pine cone since pine resin was used in the production of wine. The pine cone has also been a symbol of fertility and regeneration since ancient times, and Dionysus himself is a fertility god with strong ties to regeneration in his backstory, or Bacchus story if you'll forgive the pun. The upper classes of the colonial era would have been well versed in the classics, and so this symbol of life and merrymaking adorned their homes. Furthermore, not many people know this, but pineapples don't grow in bunches on trees like coconuts. Instead, they grow on stalks like this, which only makes them look more like a thrisis and further add to the confusion. But yeah, to cut a long story short, pineapples are used as a symbol of hospitality in modern times, but that association only began in the 1930s as part of an advertising campaign, not an indigenous or colonial tradition. I suspect the connection persists to this day for one simple reason, and once again, it's economics. It's easier to market a symbol of welcome than one of wealth. Sure, people still like to show off their money, that's never changed, but what more agreeable way to do that than to be welcoming and hospitable to all passers-by? This bookmark perpetuates the myth of the sea captain because people like a good story, and you can buy it in a Williamsburg gift shop. Face it, economics would have prevented that myth from ever being true, but economics is also what drove the pineapple's popularity in Europe, spurred Dole to invent the connection with hospitality, and continues to motivate businesses to repeat that story to this day. It's all about money, and it always has been. Could it be about something else, however? Something much more appropriate to the pineapple's unique nature? What particular symbolism do I have in mind for these fascinating fruits? One word. Revenge. You see, pineapples are the only known naturally occurring source of bromelain. It's a special kind of enzyme which breaks down proteins, such as the ones which give meat its structural integrity. That's why you can buy pineapple enzyme at the grocery store for use as a chemical meat tenderizer, and you may have used it in a biology class to separate DNA from pureed peas. It has also been claimed that pineapple plantation workers, due to prolonged exposure, eventually have their fingerprints erased, but I have yet to find a conclusive scientific study which can confirm or deny this hypothesis. And you know that tingly sensation you get on your lips and tongue when you eat fresh pineapple? That's not actually a taste. It's the bromelain slowly dissolving the tender, exposed flesh of your mouth. Basically, when you eat a pineapple, it eats you back. I still put it on my pizza, though, because I'm not a coward. If I may digress momentarily, it can be quite difficult to correctly source popular quotes. Smart-sounding ones usually get attributed to Einstein, while profound ones go to the Buddha, and anything pithy goes to Mark Twain. That's why right now, I'm going to quote myself, or more specifically, a novel I'm working on which is all about revenge and employs the pineapple as one of its central symbols. The fruit of revenge is sweet, at first, but as consumed, so too does it consume, and after a time it is no longer as pleasant as it once seemed at the beginning. And there you have it. Although they've become a symbol of hospitality in modern times, pineapples were originally used to represent nobility and staggering wealth, but perhaps they're best suited to symbolize revenge. Let me know which meaning you'd most like to associate with them in the comments below. Until next time, thanks for watching, and have a fascinating day.